So, when we talk about mastery or competency-based learning, we can mean a lot of different things. And in talking about personalized and differentiated options in the last video, mastery-based is really kind of more on the competency end. And so, what we mean by that is there's a certain level to which you need your students to perform before they move on, to the next topic or the next level. And this is something that has been, debated and discussed a lot at various levels of education. It definitely is more relevant and necessary in some subjects, versus others, particularly where there's a lot of scaffolding involved. Topics-based courses, it's not quite as significant a concern for educators. So what I would say is, regardless of what you've heard about it or any attempts that you may have tried or other people have tried, um, I wouldn't necessarily dismiss it outright if you didn't feel that it was necessarily appropriate for you and for your students, because there are certainly it can help to even regulate certain behaviors within your class. So I mentioned in the Designing for Behavior video that a course navigation quiz I find particularly helpful, because then I know for sure that students fully understand, what the course is about, what the expectations are. And it's not just because I, did a screencast and showed them all of this stuff and highlighted key points of the syllabus, but I also set a quiz that is a required 100% score before they can even move on to the other content areas within the course. That's how important that is. I don't want to have to be fielding questions about, things like this. I need them to understand it. And I believe I explained that the way that that works is I have, a pool of questions, and the quiz just pulls from that question bank, and it pulls it at random. And then as students have multiple attempts, it pulls different questions, each time. So it really just kind of depends on how anything that you think I need students to understand this, and a C is not acceptable, like they need a certain level. And so I'm going to use just kind of the quiz in here as an example of that. So when I go into the same quiz we've been in before, I'm going to touch base on a couple of different components of the different features of Canvas that can be helpful to you in this respect. So with, kind of the standard quizzes, remember there are all of these, different options that you have for setting it up. But one of the things that, certainly for the example that I had with the course navigation screencast, I might limit the time on it to make sure that they, do fully understand it. If they're going to go back and spend, all their time looking at notes, then, sometimes it's fine. Sometimes there's no problem with them doing that. Sometimes you want to limit it because you want them to at least have a pretty solid understanding. And if they're just going to check to be sure that they're right, on something, then that's okay too. We could talk all day about academic dishonesty online. Believe me, we've done, half-day long workshops on it. But for now, we're just going to kind of stick with some basic ways to kind of keep them on task and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So you can shuffle the answers, although again, it's a pool. You can limit the time. And then I've got here this multiple attempts, allow multiple attempts. And it's a really sort of nondescript part of the page. You almost miss it. So when you click on allow multiple attempts, for mine, so one of the examples that I had that was not related to a course navigation, I had a problem with students just not reading the chapter before coming to class. Big shock, right? No teacher ever had that problem before. And so I needed them to not only have read it, but to understand at least the major points of it. They didn't have to. It wasn't a gotcha quiz, it was just, did you touch base with it? Do you generally understand it? And so for me, I needed them to get at least an 80 on that quiz. That tells me that you have at least a solid understanding of what the chapter's about, because the questions weren't really all that difficult. So when I allow multiple attempts, for me, it wasn't even part of the grade. I just said, this is what you have to have. I don't care if you get a 90 or 100. I just need you to at least get an 80 before you come to class, so that we have this discussion at a level where everybody can participate. So, for me, if I changed this and changed it to 0 points and everything, then the quiz score to keep is irrelevant. But if you do want to keep it, you've got options of the highest, the latest, or the average. It just kind of depends on what you need. And for me, I allowed 2 attempts. So for them, as far as the reading goes, it's fine if they didn't get it right. They didn't quite they didn't quite get the mark the first time. The second time they take it, it pulls another set of questions, and then they've got another shot at it. And I told them, I gave them plenty of time. You can keep the chapter open, highlight it, mark it up, do whatever you want to it. It's not, again, trying to catch you getting the wrong answer. It's really just my assurance that you understand what you're talking about. And so all of those things can give you that kind of environment and give you some assurance that they do know what they're doing when they come in. So I'm not going to go into that same part. I'm going to go into the questions now and just show you what the sort of test bank looks like. So this one just had that, like I said, it just had this sort of, one standard question to show other things here. But if I want to make a pool to pull from, I'm going to click New Question Group. If you have multiple groups, then you can certainly call it something different. For me, just as far as like a mastery-based assessment, it doesn't really matter what I call it. They're not going to see it anyway. So I am going to go actually to link to a question bank. And I would have to have this question bank already loaded. And it can be a lot of things. Like you can see this quiz here already has the one question in it. So as soon as you make a quiz, that quiz becomes a question bank. So if you used a quiz, in the past and you want to pull questions from that quiz, this is how you can easily do that. This one, I actually pulled this question bank off of the Commons area in Canvas. So if you have not had time, I know you've been very busy, but if you have not explored Commons, you really, really should. That's going to save you a lot of energy, a lot of effort, and as useful as some of these things are, that I can tell you, nothing's going to replace looking in somebody else's class that looks somewhat similar to yours, maybe is roughly the same grade level. I wouldn't discount looking at other grade levels and other subject areas. People do some really, really incredible things. And so looking on Commons gives you a sense of what that is. Anybody who posted these things in Commons, they're basically allowing you to use it then. So you can download it and you can see this question. Now, this is a U.S. history bank, and that's a really big subject area. So there's 257 questions in this bank. That's a lot. If you use a published textbook, they're going to have it broken down by chapter. And so you can just load those into your system and then just pull from each chapter as you need to. Or you can just make your own. You can make your own question banks. There was one textbook I had that came with no questions. And so I created, 60 to 100 questions per chapter so that I, could pull from this. Again, a lot of time. Took a lot of time to do that. But again, never had to do it again. So considering how many sections of it I had to teach, it was kind of worth my time. So I'm going to select the bank, and then this is very important. You got to click Create Group. Otherwise, it won't make the question for you. So click Create Group, and now you've got, oops, I'm sorry, I made one mistake here. I need them to pull 10 questions out of this. So out of this 257 bank, they're going to just pull 10. And they'll pull 10 kind of at random for different students and for different attempts. So even the students are not going to get the same questions that they have. Okay. Then you just got to click Save. And now you can see that it's updated. I've got, 11 points here. And when I click Preview, you can go in. And again, you can use the Test Student option, but it's just a few extra clicks and the Preview button's just easier. So I've got my original question, and then I've got question 2, question 3, question 4, all of these other questions that are, available here. And again, it just pulled them at random. So this is what is going to go into there. So you can look at all of those. But again, realizing that it only pulled them at random. And so you don't really know what other questions students are going to get. So that's a very important part of it as well. All right. Let's see. It's good to keep editing this quiz. Now, the last thing that I wanted to show you is actually unrelated to, question pools and everything. But I did want to show you the Mastery Paths feature. And this is I don't know, it's not even really a relatively new feature. It's probably maybe 3 years old at this point. This is one of those things I was talking about as a great first attempt in a solid pedagogical direction for teachers, but it hasn't really been developed since it was created, and it needs a little bit of work. So what Mastery Paths allows you to do, and you should spend some time really kind of digging into it, is you could create a quiz. And let's say I've got 11 points on this quiz here, okay? Now, if I change this and I say, so right now this path is from 7.7 points to 8 points. I might want to change that, obviously, since, they're not going to get 7.7. I might want to say 8, and then I might want to say 6, and then my last one would be 0. So basically, this category is 0 to 5. So if they got 0 to 5 on this quiz, this is where you're going to go. If you got 6 to 7, this is where you're going to go. And if you got 8 to 11, this is where you're going to go. What that does is it allows you to add other assignments, other content that you think is going to be necessary for that certain level. Now, so if students are, presumably, this is where the kind of the faulty thinking kind of comes in. If students performed at, 8, 9, 10, 11, which it probably should be tighter than that, but if they performed at a higher level, you're pretty well assured that they understand the basics, and you can add assignments and content here that will challenge them a little bit more. So they're kind of going beyond where, everybody's at. Keeps the kids that are really solid still engaged, still excited, about learning. And then this middle group, if they're going from 6 to, whatever, this is a bad example. 6 to 7 is too short of a window. But if they're in the middle there, then you say, okay, they've got a grip on some of this stuff, but we need to, kind of build on this a little bit. And so you can create literally a mastery path for them so that they can, get the content that they need. And then at the lower levels, it's kind of another remediation step, for students to be sure that they're covering, some of the basics again. The challenge with this tool, I can see a lot of great uses for this, especially if it's interest-based learning and it's not really anything solidly tied to standards or anything. Well, everything's tied to standards, but it's nothing that is very specific content. Maybe it's individual skills. Then you can offer different options for students, and that's all they'll see. Like depending on how they score on this quiz, they won't see all of the other stuff, which is really nice from a design perspective because you can streamline this stuff down to these categories. This is the problem. If I'm giving this quiz, I have no idea why the student scored a 9 or a 10 or an 11. It might be that there are specific objectives that represent the questions that they got wrong. I can't tell that. It doesn't allow me to tag those. All I'm seeing here is they performed at this level on this quiz, and this is where they can go. And then they performed at this level, and this is where they could go. With an objective assessment, I don't know why they scored that way. Maybe they guessed badly and they still understood this stuff. Maybe there was only like one section that they really struggled with, and the rest of it they were fine on. And so this is a tool that needs some tweaking. It's definitely something worth exploring and playing around with if you've got some personalized options for students and you want them to have, it's not absolutely critical that you understand the nuance of every single part of their understanding of a unit. But if there's something just sort of, like I said, more general interest stuff, this is where this sort of thing can be useful. But I would say this, and I'll hammer this point home later on too. Canvas, like a lot of other learning management systems, they really kind of pride themselves on being an educational partner, not a vendor, not a business. They want to be a partner. And I would say challenge them to that. If this isn't working for you, go into the Canvas community pages, post a question, respond to somebody else and say, hey, look, this is great. You guys are you have a great start, but this is really what I need this for. And nobody can really say that except you, because you've got a different experience with your grades and your kids, and that is really, really very helpful for them when it comes to developing things moving forward. So I would say that for anything in Canvas. If there's something that you're like, it feels just a little bit like a pebble in your shoe, and this is why, and you can articulate to them why this is a problem, you might in future iterations see some of that manifest in a better version of these tools. So that's basically all the different ways that you can encourage mastery in students, or you can offer some differentiated or personalized options, which, it looks like a lot of work, but in the end, it gives them really fantastic learning opportunities that are truly deeply meaningful for individual students, and it's still going to take you less time than when you were in a face-to-face classroom.